Hi, I too measure potential suitors based off of their viability as a hostage. Andrew, and this is Gayties Toys. On today's MIA 80s Ladies, we're going to be taking a look at really particularly one character, but also, a wider group of characters based around the 1990s and early 2000s Batman movies. Really, these are characters who aren't necessarily putting the action in action figures, but they are certainly, main characters, named characters, sometimes, very often from the comic books with great deep historical roots there. So with all that, let's just get into Vicki Vale, Dr. Chase Meridian, and others from the Batman movies. Batman is, of course, Batman, created by Bill Finger and Bob Kane back in 1939. He is, one of the pillars of not just DC Comics, but comic books in general, and also a mass media juggernaut. So his tales within media go right back to 1949, when there was a serial called Batman and Robin. During the production of that, Bob Kane had actually run into a rising star actress named Marilyn Monroe, and really based the Vicki Vale character that was supposed to be introduced in that serial based off of Monroe. But also very obviously Vicki Vale. VV, LL, MM, lots of alliteration for everybody. Despite the seismic success of the 1960s Batman, it really became sort of what audiences knew Batman to be: campy, corny, one-liners. And DC certainly wanted to, kind of change the narrative in the 80s, particularly after, successes such as The Dark Knight Rises, that kind of thing. So they approached Tim Burton to create a new Batman feature that would really sort of revolutionize comic book, much the way, 1979 Superman did. That 1989 movie, of course, was just called Batman, and it was a seismic event. For those of you not old enough to know what had transpired that summer leading up to Batman, it was Batmania. It was sort of the only thing remotely on par with it would have been Star Wars Episode 1. You could not leave your house. You couldn't even stay in your house without seeing or hearing Batman trailers, Batman Mania, Batman on the news, Batman on commercials. It was pure pandemonium, and the hype was real. The movie, of course, starred, famously now, Michael Keaton as Batman and Jack Nicholson as Joker. Originally, Sean Young, who is known as an actress, was portrayed, Vicki Vale. However, she got into a riding accident, so really, the first person who was available who had sort of, same acting caliber as Sean Young was sort of put in the role, and that being Kim Basinger.
It's Basinger.
Basinger's Vicki Vale was a photojournalist of some renown who came to Gotham looking for, tales of a masked vigilante named the Batman, very early in his career. So early that he only just met the Joker, his brief nemesis, in the movie until his untimely death. As such, she very much became, entwined in their conflict. Unfortunately, Vale, like most women in movies at this time, particularly action movies, was love interest, hostage. There really wasn't a lot more to it. She had, interesting enough character, fabulous style, outrageously enormous apartment, but by and large, she was a means to an end. Among the many marketing tie-ins for this movie, there was, of course, action figures. Around that time, let's say in 1986, Kenner had sort of, wrapped up the Superpowers collection, and in between that time, Toy Biz was a new up-and-coming toy company, and they had very briefly snagged the DC license. Despite a bit of hype on their end, Toy Biz was a little in over their heads. They hadn't really produced many action figures at that point, particularly not with the status and hype of Batman. So very clearly, they kind of took Kenner's Superpowers figures and sort of tried to recreate them, let's just say. The original, concept and prototypes for the Michael Keaton Batman was very clearly just a Superpowers Batman, painted all black with a hole in his belt that was supposed to, use the grappling hook feature of the toy eventually. That said, it appears that they took, I would say, wax molds and, try to produce figures based off of that. But however, during that process, the things got, just warped to hell. So, it doesn't really look much like Batman. Likewise, Joker is some kind of abomination. Certainly does not look like Jack Nicholson. I, like everyone, was outrageously excited to see these toys, and I got them, and there was someone missing. There was a few characters missing, to be honest, but I mean, like, it was really odd and a bit of a personal attack that Vicky wasn't there. It was a really strange thing because you had, I wouldn't say a movie with a lot of characters, but, very specific, beats that you would want. I mean, they're not exciting characters, but I wanted the Commissioner Gordon. I wanted the Alfred. I wanted Billy D. Williams, Harvey Dent. And I certainly wanted Vicki Vale, even if just as that sort of tired old trope that, you get female action figures put into a line as a source of drama, as, like the movie, a hostage. So it really was unfortunate. She had a lot of great looks. I don't know which one I would have picked, probably Blue Dress, but it really was noticeable that we got Vicki Vale. And if you say, well, she's not really part of the action, she's not a fun, we got Bob the Goon. We got Bob the Goon. It was such a stupid figure. He goes down as legendarily one of the worst figures, but also weirdly one of the most beloved. Some of this kind of got remedied, however, with the smash success of Batman 1989. There was, of course, a sequel. In 1992, we finally got Batman Returns, which featured Penguin and Catwoman, legendarily played by Michelle Pfeiffer. Kenner, by this point, had gotten back the license. DC was not happy, for obvious reasons, with what Toy Biz did, and their reign as the DC license holder was incredibly brief. Kenner at this time was gobbled up by Hasbro, and they would sort of break ranks from Hasbro's No Girls Allowed policy from the mid-80s onwards with a Catwoman figure. She didn't come out in the first wave, but she would eventually come out, and is such a great figure, but also, unfortunately, the first Catwoman figure to do that weird one leg in front, crouching prowl stance that all Catwoman figures would come with. The movie, again, was a success, but, some fans, I would say particularly parents, were a little off-put by how horny Catwoman was. It was a very sexually charged kids movie, so DC decided to sort of recalibrate here a little bit, and they, launched, almost essentially, the same universe, but a very different style when they went with Batman Forever in 1995. Directed by legendary homosexual Joel Schumacher, Batman Forever was almost a callback to the very 1960s camp that they had tried to buck in the first place. It was neon colors, tacky lines, outrageously over-the-top characters. It was certainly a departure, and some people, did not quite care for it. It's certainly, become, memorable since. Some people really do have a soft spot for it, but really, really wackadoo stuff. And also, because Joel Schumacher's hands were all over it, gay as hell. I mean, if you were a confused youth at this time, Chris O'Donnell's codpiece would gay you right up. The leading lady in this movie would be Dr. Chase Meridian, who was entirely a character created for the movie. She had no real roots in comic books. She's a funny duck too, because I mean, she was someone who certainly played the hostage role, but almost harkened back to Catwoman, where she was very, horny, very unprofessional, very horny. So I don't know what the push and pull here was, but possibly because of the horniness, possibly because of, just the kind of unnecessariness of the character, she too was shut out of the Kenner Batman Forever toy line. Two characters from that movie, while not huge roles, although one was played by Drew Barrymore, would be Sugar and Spice, who were sort of, let's say escorts of Two-Face. They were, certainly colorful, certainly, again, over the top, very cartoonish, very fun designs. Again, they were horny but professional, maybe even professional. So again, probably not really what Kenner or Angry Moms were looking for. This string of Batman movies from the 90s would eventually culminate in Batman and Robin in 1997. Again, directed by Joel Schumacher, again, high camp. This would feature both Batgirl and Poison Ivy, coming off of their success of Batman the Animated Series, played by Uma Thurman and Alicia Silverstone. It was certainly, very much in that high camp vein. However, at the very least, I think the actors knew what movie they were in, so, they were in on the joke at the very least. Both Batgirl and Poison Ivy got actually quite a few figures between the regular release, between 12-inch dolls, between, they really got like a number of looks, despite very precious few of those looks looking like the characters in the movie. To get technical and completionist, because I will on this channel, there was another character named Julia Madison, who was Bruce Wayne's girlfriend in that movie. Julia Madison, like Vicki Vale, is a very, very old character. She first appeared in 1939. As a love interest to Bruce, and like Vale, would sort of flit in and out of the Batman comics ever since. Nevertheless, I mean, if you told me her scenes were cut, if you told me she actually was never in the movie, I would believe you. I mean, she was played by Elle Macpherson, who, no disregard to her, but I mean, she brought nothing to the table. This character did not need to be there, aside from, just something pretty to look at. This really is kind of a great example of women in these movies. I mean, it really it boils down to, are you an action style kind of character, or are you kind of a supporting style character? And again, especially with Toy Biz, where they were, again, out of their depths, were not prepared to really kind of go do an expansive line, versus Kenner, who very well could but didn't. I mean, they didn't really go flesh out the cast of the movies. I mean, Max Schreck is an example where he's another character like Vicki Vale I would have loved to have seen in the Batman Returns line, but was shut out because he wasn't, I guess, toyetic enough. So we don't get Vicky's, we do get Catwoman and Ivy. So it's a thing where, you do really need to sort of, pop on toy shelves. And I understand the reluctance, but I feel like of all of these, I mean, Vicki Vale really was the one who, much like Lois Lane, who I've talked about in this channel, was someone who deserving of a figure, someone intrinsic to the plot, someone you do actually associate with the movie. So how have they fared since? These characters, in relation to both the movie and the comic books, have sort of been done dirty over the years. So not unlike Lois Lane, who probably should get a lot more action figures than she has gotten, these characters have not. So it's really kind of unfortunate, but again, these aren't exactly fan favorites. That said, there is some sort of, modern toy lines who have, at the very least, sort of tried to adapt these movies once again for modern collectors. Starting in 2024, McFarlane Toys, under their DC Multiverse umbrella, started kind of working backwards. They started with a wave of Batman and Robin figures, then Batman Forever figures, and so on. The first wave included, again, Poison Ivy and Batgirl, which was a fantastic start, particularly for McFarlane Toys. When they went to Batman Forever, neither Sugar, Spice, nor Dr. Meridian were part of that, which is too bad because they made a great big Build-A-Figure bat that could have been Dr. Meridian, but McFarlane be McFarlane. And they have announced plans to do Batman Returns, which of course would include Catwoman and Max Schreck, thankfully. But given their license lapse at the end of 2025, it's unclear if they'll actually get two Batman 1999. And at this stage, I would very much doubt that they would get Vicki Vale. However, should be done dirty yet again. In 2025, Mezco, as part of their 5 Points line, indicated that they would be making Batman 1989 figures, very much based off of the Toy Biz line. This felt like good news where they could have at least tried to expand the line, at least with Vicky, maybe Kamish, maybe Harvey, maybe anyone, but alas, they're really sticking to the Toy Biz margins here. So we got Batman and Joker looking at least a little bit more like the actors, and of course, Bob the goddamn goon, but no Vicki Vale. This might have been a good time to right some wrongs, Mezco. As I mentioned before, McFarlane will be losing the DC license end of 2025 and to be picked up by Mattel. We'll see what Mattel does with it. I mean, we really have no idea at this time of recording. So that said, I mean, given, they kind of have to start fresh, I wouldn't expect them to be like, we got to do Vicki Vale, we got to do Dr. Chase Meridian. And again, I understand this. I don't want to feel like I'm just whinging here. I mean, I feel like I could do without a Chase Meridian figure, but Vicki Vale, I feel like she was really an important figure within the film mythos, much more than other leading ladies beyond, your Catwomans, your Poison Ivies, your Batgirls. So I hope at some point we do get something. If you're really desperate for one, there's some customizers out there who could help you, but by and large, this really is sort of, a wider issue. Anytime there was sort of a big tentpole action movie, like say Robin Hood, or something like that, where, Maid Marian was excluded. I mean, this is a trend for sure, a frustrating one, but one that you kind of get. These were one and done lines. They weren't exactly out there to world build. They weren't exactly out there to, produce female figures who won't sell, all of that. But, nevertheless, I still want that Vicky. If you'll excuse me, I'm going to dance with the devil by the pale moonlight. So I would like to thank you, in the meantime, for watching, for liking, for subscribing, for all those YouTube-y things. And I will see you next time on MMA 80s Ladies.